Hello and welcome to the Master Integrator podcast. I'm your host, Paul Skelton. This week, we're heading north, far north, specifically to Seminyak in Bali, to sit down with David Ledermann, the co-founder of SGS Design and Integration, and one of only a handful of certified Control 4 dealers in all of Indonesia. David's story is an unusual one. He started out as a Swiss-trained hospitality manager and ended up running a 15-person integration business in one of the most chaotic supply markets on the planet. At one point, a Raspberry Pi he set up was running an entire resort's phone system for the next 8 years. So stick around, we'll be straight into it after a quick word from this episode's sponsors. This episode is brought to you by ADI Global, formerly Snap One, your one-stop partner for professional integration. ADI brings together powerhouse brands like Control 4, Arachnus, Binary and Strong, along with a carefully curated range of distributed products, all under one roof. And they back it up with genuine integrator-first support from system design through to installation and beyond. They're focused on helping you deliver smarter, more reliable projects, because when you win, they win. If you want to learn more, give the team a call on 1-800-990-548. We're also supported by Sonance, the benchmark in architectural audio. This episode is brought to you by Blaze by Sonance. Blaze is a high-efficiency amplification platform built for the demands of modern residential and commercial installs. Onboard DSP, flexible connectivity, and the kind of output that lets you deliver a genuinely great audio experience without overcomplicating the rack. If you want precision and scalability in an amp solution that actually integrates cleanly, Blaze is worth a serious look. Sonance is available exclusively in Australia through Amber Technology. Now, if you're looking for serious design firepower behind your next project, let me introduce you to Colosseum. Colosseum is a white label design and documentation partner built specifically for integrators, specializing in cinema and media room design, lighting control, and automation engineering. And their new Spark program is a big deal. If your vendor is Spark enabled, you can unlock Colosseum designed cinemas at nearly half the usual cost. Lower upfront investment, immersive 3D walkthroughs, faster sales conversations. Colosseum really is the design and documentation wingman you didn't know you needed. There's a particular kind of integrator who ends up in this industry from somewhere completely unrelated. And David Ledermann is one of them. He came to Bali for a hospitality job. He ended up 4 hours in the middle of nowhere, managing a luxury resort with no proper Wi-Fi, no movie system, no in-room AV really worth talking about. But his hobby since the age of 15 had been building home cinemas and running projection setups for raves back in his home country of Switzerland. So he just started fixing things. Normally with Raspberry Pis, one of which, as I mentioned before, ran the resort's entire phone system for 8 years. That kind of resourcefulness becomes a theme in this conversation, because the reality of doing integration work in Indonesia is something most of us don't appreciate. $3,000 or $4,000 to certify every single product, in every single colour, every 3 or 4 years. Brands quietly leaving the market because the paperwork doesn't justify the volume. Service centres simply don't exist. Grey importers shifting containers of product around official channels. The Australian government even denied David's wife and business partners visas to Integrate Expo last year because the business was, in the government's words, doing too well. We cover all of that. The market, the customers, the education gap, the import nightmare, and for any Australian suppliers listening, whether there's a real opportunity in Indonesia. Which there is, but it's not the kind of opportunity most distributors are set up for. This is Master Integrator. Here's David Ledermann. David, welcome to the show. Let's go straight into it and go right to the beginning. I need to know what brought a Swiss hospitality worker to move to Bali, and then how on earth did you actually then find your way into the smart home industry?
All right, so it's a bit of a long story and I'll go on some tangents, but it all started by me living in Hong Kong where my brother was working. And Hong Kong being super high tech, super intense place to live in, and I was actually overwhelmed. So I thought, okay, let me look for a job again in hospitality, and I found a job in Bali for hotel management. So I was like, okay, sure, let's do that. I've never been to Indonesia. I've been all over Southeast Asia, but never to Indonesia. So I thought, let's do it. Sounds good. I got the job. They picked me up at the airport, and then it was a 4-hour drive into the middle of nowhere. So I was working in a resort that's really like old part of Bali in the northwest in a national park. So you have to imagine this. So I live in a village. I'm the only foreigner. Every day I go to work. All the locals are waving at me. Hello, pa, hello, 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 hello. Apa kabar? And I work in this luxury resort, which is in a national park, only 22 rooms on 140 hectares. So massive, right? So to get from one restaurant to the other restaurant, you had to take a little car to get there, drive through dirt roads. And the price wasn't cheap. I mean, that's 13 years ago. Like the beach villas were around $600 per night. And I was kind of upset with the approach of, oh, it's good enough. It's Bali. We don't need to do nice things. That started with everything. It started with how bad the Wi-Fi was, how bad the customer experience was. So yes, I work in hospitality, but my hobby was always building home cinemas, doing projection setups, building home media servers. That's already going back 20 years. When I was 15, I used to do projection setups for raves. So that was always my hobby. So I'm in this resort in the middle of nowhere, so I have a lot of time on my hand. You can only do it that much in F&B. So I was kind of wondering, so what can we do to improve things? So the first thing I did was, let's create like a background music concept, because I had one playlist that just played from morning till night in every area, and people they stay, their whole holiday in that resort. So it's like, that doesn't work. So I created the music playlists, and then I tried to explain to the team, okay, this time play this time play this time play this. Of course, it didn't work. It worked for one day, and then people forgot about it. So I scripted together a script for Winamp, if anybody still remembers Winamp software, to automatically play the correct playlist. And it's like, oh, it just works. Great. One thing I have to worry less about as the manager, right? As the F&B manager in that hotel. So the next thing was the movie watching experience. So every room had a TV inside the villa, but that TV was not connected to anything. It just had a DVD player. So the process was, and that was just the way it was. So people had to pick up the phone to call the reception. So they called the reception, which actually wasn't the reception, it was the restaurant by the beach, to tell them, I want to watch a movie. Then the guy on the beach had to take a walkie talkie that barely worked to call the reception, which was like 1.5 kilometers up the mountain. Please, I need the box of DVDs, so that somebody at the reception can sit in a car, drive down, through the dirt roads. Takes him like 5 to 10 minutes to get to the beach restaurant. Then they go with the box to the guest, say, here, pick a few movies. Then the guest picks a few movies, and half of them probably stopped working halfway through because they were too scratched already. So I was like, come on, guys, we can't do this when people are paying $600 a night. So I'm like, back then I was already building a home cinemas for friends based on Raspberry Pi 1. So I approached the owner of the hotel. I was like, hey, can we, maybe do something? And they're like, yeah, we can, but we have no budget. I was like, okay, we have no budget. So I know about this little thing called the Raspberry Pi. Maybe we can do something like this. So in the end, we ended up wiring up all the different areas where there were rooms with proper networking. Every room got a little Raspberry Pi 1B and a little Synology NAS. We ripped all the movies that we had them on the NAS, and I created a custom user interface using Kodi. It's a multimedia software, so that we actually had like the hotel, and they had a way to browse like the spa treatments and all of this in that same user interface, but it was all running on Kodi basically. It was very hacked together. I'm not a programmer. I had so much time on my hands. So it's just like, okay, what happens if I change this line of code? Oh, okay, I can play around with this. So in the end, we had this, right? And then I was like, okay, but now the phone system, we already have networking now. Can we just add an IP system? So I approached some people in the industry, and they're like, yeah, of course, X amount of thousands of dollars. And the hotel owner was again like, oh, we don't have budget. So in the end, I also used the Raspberry Pi 1 and to have asterisks on it. And that was, I think that was their hotel phone system for the next 8 years, running on a Raspberry Pi 1B.
Wow. Okay.
so 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 once my contract was finished, the director of that hotel chain, he was like, David, you know, you're good in hospitality, but you have all these other talents. Why don't you just start your own company? And back then I was in my mid 20s. I was a little bit like, well, but I can't, right? I need this experience first, and this experience first, and this experience first. And he was like, no, David, you just start, like, and he gave an example. He said like this, I just started an air conditioning company. I don't know anything about air conditioning, but I see there's a market need. so, so 12 years ago, I was like this, and it took me quite a long time to find the right niche, but because I started out thinking we can approach the hotels for similar solutions, but that didn't really work out. So then slowly we started shifting to offering better networking installations and CCTV installations and home cinema installations for villas. But even then, back then, it was really difficult because people still had that Bali mindset of, oh, I want it cheap, right? And it's an oxymoron. Like good and cheap just doesn't exist, and I did the mistake, and I had to learn to kind of bend to the wishes of yeah, my clients back then, and install things that worked well enough for somebody like me who knows how to fix it, but it doesn't work well enough for a guest that rents a villa. And then I had to deal with villa managers on a Sunday and jumping on a motorbike to go somewhere to unplug a Raspberry Pi or an Apple TV and plug it back in. So yeah, and that led me to a situation where I nearly left until somebody who used to do Control 4 in Bali, who I knew since many years, approached me and asked me if I don't want to, take over his company, and as he was moving back to Australia. And it was the right moment, the right time, and then from there we just grew exponentially.
And so today that is SGS Design and Integration.
Yes.
So how has that evolved from where you started? Because I imagine you're probably not doing too much with Raspberry Pi anymore, although I could be wrong.
No.
But yeah, so what has it become today?
So it went from a one-man job, which was me, just trying to do everything myself, to now we have a team of 15 people, and we keep growing. We focus on high-end residential and hospitality solutions, and we take so many steps trying to make sure, how do we service something remotely, how do we avoid all the issues that are very common in Bali, because you deal with the weather, high humidity, bad electricity, and then you also have to deal with bad workmanship from third parties, so electricians. There are no real electricians here. There's just people who do electrical work who've never went to school for it. So there's all sorts of things you have to deal with, and it's a keep evolving story, right? We keep learning new things. We started now distributing cords because we had the problem that there's a lot of fake cables in Indonesia. So we had the electrician run speaker cables that disintegrate after 2 years because it's aluminium. So it's like aluminium clad. And in, in
Wow.
this
Okay.
weather, you just have like speaker cables that disintegrate in situation where everything is brick walls with conduits where you can't pull anything new. So those were all like painful lessons we had to learn, and we just try our best to avoid any of these downfalls to happen down the line, to protect our clients basically, because we want our clients to be happy. We want our clients to have a system that they can enjoy for many years to come.
And if we look at where you are today as well, so obviously you're certified Control 4, you've got ISF, you've got PVA, THX certifications. Is that a rarity in the Indonesian market? And I guess for you, how hard was it to get those certifications in Indonesia?
Yeah, it is a rarity, and I didn't do any of those certifications in Indonesia. So THX and PVA, I did. They usually go once a year to Thailand, so I flew to Bangkok and did it there. There's probably 10 people who have that in Indonesia. We're one of three only certified Control 4 dealerships. So that also means that there aren't many properly certified people. So it's very tricky, and I was actually super happy when Snap One developed that new system where you can buy a rack and do the certification of team members in your business. So that was one of the things that was stuck in the 6 month import. So we just received that, and now we're going to start certifying all of our team because we want them to grow. We want them to also in the future maybe have the opportunity to work abroad because that certification can help them to get a job maybe somewhere else. So it's a big mission of mine just to make it easier for people to grow if they want to grow, because there are many people in Indonesia who are hungry for growth, hungry for something else, and the normal schooling system doesn't really provide that. you know it's very different than in, let's say, Australia or Switzerland, where we have apprenticeships and very um, how's it called, skill based training. Here it's all about universities. All universities are usually private. That means they just kind of drag people along. We hired people with electrical engineering degrees, and we had to let them go because I had to explain to them, that DC, what is AC, positive, negative, with people that have a university degree in electrical engineering. So it doesn't mean anything, and it's actually kind of sad that there isn't more like a trades culture where people learn by doing and then actually get into the work field with work experience. So everybody here comes with a university degree and zero work experience.
Yeah, so that's interesting then. So obviously, if you are looking for people and they don't really have that experience, how much time are you spending teaching them from scratch and kind of those fundamentals that would be nice to have, but they don't?
It's a difficult thing, right? So anyone who starts with us, we treat them as they come with nothing specific to our company, but we try to hire people that have two different talents mainly. So we want people to have a little bit of an IT talent, so they know how to use a computer, they know how to set up a basic network, and then the people who come more from the civil electrical work, so they've done electrical work, not to the level we're doing, but they know how to open a wall and run wiring, and then we try to cross pollinate. So the ones who've never worked on a computer before, we always pair them up with somebody who does, and we try to have this party learn from this party and vice versa. We also, anyone who does programming, of course, we do the basic Control for online course first, but that will now change, of course, that we have that proper setup. But I think it's all about just it's more learning by doing. So our teams are usually bigger. We never send just one person to a site. It's always at least two or three, so they can all kind of compensate. Oh, this person is good at this, so this person can learn from him, and so the teams are always 2 to 3 people that go somewhere at a minimum.
So when we are then talking about training, specifically within control systems, so obviously your C4, but if it was Crestron, Savant, whoever it is, um, in order to get your technicians through the training, though, do you then have to send them offshore to do that? And surely that's a cost that you would then have to cover as a business operator.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be like this. And the problem is not just the cost, it's also the visa. Because it's just a fact. If you are Indonesian, you have an Indonesian passport, it's really hard to get a visa. Like I came to integrate with my wife, who's my business partner, and she's really involved in our company. So I wanted her to also come to integrate, to meet suppliers and see what the industry is all about. And we applied for a business visa, with all the documentation and everything we do, and her visa got denied because the Australian government thought, oh, you have a well-running business, you can afford to stay in Australia and not return.
How does that work?
Yes. Yeah, it's like the Australian government thought we're just going to sacrifice our business, and we even had our kids back home, right? To rather stay in Australia. So this is so it's not really realistic. Sending somebody to Bangkok for THX certification, that's possible, but sending them to Australia was not possible. So that's why I was so thrilled when ADI Snap One um, showed their new way of doing certification, which can we can do here in Indonesia by buying the rack, and then they do an online. It's like a 60-hour long course, and then they have an exam with all that equipment. So yeah, I was like, I immediately walked up to Adam and said, "It's one of the best things you've done for us, in the last 5 years, because now we can actually certify someone, and it's not all on me to teach them every little thing."
Yeah. Have you seen other suppliers offer similar setups? So if you do need to do networking or any other form of training, AV, is there anyone else on the radar who's kind of offering that type of setup?
Unify, Ubiquity have started offering certain certifications in Jakarta, so that's good. And some of our team member went there. Um, Crestron, they would do the training, I think, in Singapore, which that's also doable. Um, I think that's about it. It's the integrator market is very small and kind of, what's the right word? A little bit guarded off. So
Yep.
so it's not public, there isn't the distributor and dealer relationship. So it's a bit difficult. What I've seen though is that there's one big dealer of Snap One in Indonesia. So they are doing small training to allow people to work with Control 4 who aren't officially certified. So they have like many sub dealers, I suppose, and they do like a 1 or 2 day training with them, and then they get access to Composer. I have mixed feelings about it. It's good that they're, training people, but it also kind of muddies the water of who can work on those systems.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you find that that mindset is widespread through Indonesia, or is it really this one player, or do you find that a lot of people are doing that because they can? And I would imagine Indonesia gets forgotten a fair bit by some of the suppliers out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough thing, right? It's like, how do you build an industry? It's a chicken and egg thing, and what I've seen over the years is more and more brands are leaving this market because of there's so much red tape. If you want to do things properly, there's so much bureaucracy involved when it comes to importing. So I understand that, like from a brand point of view, whoever pushes their brand, they just want to support them because it's so difficult to have a real presence here. Because yeah, they need to create an Indonesian company. It's very very difficult for brands to be established here unless they're massive. That's why you have brands like Yamaha dominating the audio industry because they're producing in Indonesia. So of course their speakers are 5 times cheaper than anything we would install, and they're not 5 times worse, you know. So it's very difficult, and I understand it why people find ways. It just leads to problems where it can lead to the brand name or the system to get a bad name because it's been installed in a bad way. Like we had to rip out lighting panels from, I think it was Heflar, just because it was installed terribly, and dimmers were like literally burnt with burn marks all over it. And the wiring was done terribly, not because the equipment was bad, not because the system was bad, but because the installer just they didn't know what they're doing. And I think that's can be very damaging for the industry, because then you just have people in this part of the world who just say, oh, smart homes, they just don't work, or it's a bad investment. And that's something we don't know how to approach it. We just try to show our work and our customers. But I think bad installations. Plus, on the other side, you have so many Chinese players in Indonesia that are pushing hard for their solutions, which are usually fully wireless based smart home solutions, and they also don't really, you know, create what they promise. So it's a difficult market where there's a lot of people who just feel burned by that whole segment of smart lighting and smart homes.
Yeah, you definitely sound like you're in a position where, well, Australia and New Zealand was probably 20, 25 years ago, and Europe would have been the same. And that is where a lot of people being self-taught, they are going out there and there've been bad jobs. And I talk to architects now, and they always say they've had a bad experience. And I can always pretty much pinpoint either what products were installed or who the installer was based on who the architect is. So I guess it hopefully for Indonesia's sake, you don't have to wait 20 years to get it fixed, because it's a long process and it's quite hard to unring that bell. So from someone's perspective who's on the actual ground in Indonesia, then what would you like to see from the suppliers to actually help combat that today?
I think more involvement in there are trade shows here, right? They're more usually geared around architecture, interior design, but to have more of a presence here. So there's some brands who are doing this, like Jung is very present, German brand, and when they're doing this, also make maybe courses here in Indonesia. And I think the most important thing is also to kind of bring the people in the industry a little bit together. Indonesia has a little bit of a mindset like we don't want to tell too many people what we do, so we protect what we have because we feel like if too many people do the same thing, it hurts each other. But I was always, especially here in Bali, I have always the mindset of more people doing good work raises the level and what people expect, and it grows the need in the industry, because people always ask us, "Oh, aren't they your competitors?" Like, no, like they're doing great work. They're awesome. So if they're raising the ceiling in one segment, we raise it in another segment. It's good for everyone. So I would really hope that the brands can also bring more people together and not be like, "Oh, we work only with this person, and you shouldn't work with this person." Because I see that a lot here. There's like this kind of uh, trying to guard what you have because it's such a it's a I understand it culturally, because what you see here everywhere is like there's one kind of restaurant opening here and then there's three kinds of restaurant doing exactly the same next to each other. So it's copy paste culture. So I understand why people don't want that everybody knows what they're doing, but I think it hurts the industry because then it also means nobody learns from each other, even though we all have the same struggles. And I do feel like if there would be more like of a industry bodies that kind of want to elevate everyone, that would help a lot.
Yeah, I definitely know from my other role, my senior life.
Mhm.
Yeah, that networking element, it's indispensable. I know so many people only go to events purely for the networking side. It brings the industry together, and that's where you learn the most from. You actually see what other people are doing. So yeah, I definitely think it's a fantastic opportunity to set something up like that, to get all the integrators together in a room and actually talking, because that's how the industries are built. For more than 20 years, Connected Magazine has been the leading voice for the Australian AV and custom integration industry, and it continues to hold that position today. Commercial and residential integrators can head to Connected Magazine or connectedmag.com.au for the latest news, new products, and deeper insight into where the industry is heading. To learn more, head to the website. The link is in this episode's description, or have a chat with the team next time you see them at a trade show or local event. To go on from that, when we are talking about suppliers, and I think the other thing they need to keep in mind is I guess the difficulty of you getting product. And this is something we spoke about very briefly before we started recording, and I was shocked when you were telling me this story. But If there are suppliers there who want to get into the Indonesian market and they say, okay, well, we've got this training available, we can start to deliver it. How hard is it to actually bring product into Indonesia for you to get your hands on it to then be able to put it into jobs?
So if it is not already existing in Indonesia, it's very hard. We have to go via several importers to do that work for us because there's so much red tape. So if you are a brand, and so you would need to have a distributor in the country. That distributor needs to certify every SKU. So that means, let's say I have a keypad in 5 different colors. I will have to certify it 5 times for every color. It will cost me around $3,000 to $4,000 per SKU. I would need to give them 3 or 4 pieces per SKU, and I have to redo that process every 3 or 4 years. I've heard rumors that they're trying to improve that, but it's a whole system that's basically built so certain people in government can generate a lot of tax, but the result is that there's a massive gray import market, which actually nobody really wants, right? So for people working in the industry, they much rather pay more import tax and just have things flow. But yeah, what seems to happen, only really, really big players like Yamaha, like JBL can persist in the market because they do big enough volumes that doing all that paperwork doesn't really matter to them. But all the smaller niche brands, they just leave. Like we had, like Lembrook Blue Sound left. Uh, Onkyo just closed down their AVR division. Yamaha closed down the AVR division. Um, Sony projectors left. I mean, there isn't much left here, right? The most high end projector I can officially buy is either a BenQ W5800 or like an Epson QL something. So there's a whole segment of equipment that doesn't exist. And as an integrator, of course, the problem is, yeah, technically I could import like M2 or 2M or something, but then there's no service centers. So what do I do when something is broken? I can't get it serviced. I need to send it off again to another country to get it serviced. So it creates this bad dynamic that hurts everyone. It hurts the end consumer because they have less choice, and it creates these monopolies of a few brands that just have everything and nobody can really penetrate.
So I guess then there is an opportunity for a supplier, especially suppliers who might have multiple different product lines, to really get in there and own the market almost,
Oh,
and especially
absolutely.
if it's a one-stop shop sort of setup.
Absolutely.
So at the moment, are you bringing much in? Then are you importing much as the integrator? And I guess if you are, how does that affect your bottom line? And when you specify in projects, you're going to have to factor that cost in. You'll have to factor it into business operations. Surely that becomes a massive burden on what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, on average, I would say our purchasing cost goes up by 20 to 30% just to deal with the importing, but it creates also very long lead times. So we always have to buy bigger stock to have always something spare that can expose us to having equipment that's out of date. So like I just now received like a big order of T4 Control 4 touchscreens. While they were in shipping, we get the news that a new model is coming, and I felt yay. so so it creates yeah, it just makes it more difficult for us to be very nimble and quick at projects because we can't just get something that we might need. So everything is kind of drawn out. Every project is drawn out longer. um, we're also more affected with currency fluctuations. Yeah, so it really affects the bottom line, and it adds a layer of stress that's unnecessary.
Are there product categories that are particularly hard to get, whether it's networking, audio, video, control? Is there something where you sit and go, this is the bane of my existence? This is the one thing where it was specified in a project. I know I'm going to have trouble.
Yeah, sure. Amplifiers. So anything that's niche, home cinema amplifiers that aren't Denon or Marantz, because right now that's the only thing that's available locally here. Um, Lighting control systems. So there's some things that are available here, usually from Chinese brands, which we sometimes use, like Sunricher. They do decent Dali relays, Dali drivers. So that's available here. That's great. But anything other than that that doesn't come out of China is usually not available.
Okay. Okay. So you are incredibly limited in then what you can actually specify. And if you're working in a high end property, a lot of time it's trying to make something work that it might not even really be designed to do.
Yeah, and I mean that's why we end up importing so much. I mean, and it's also okay, to be honest. The problem that there is, because the let's say you have a distribute. Let me give you an example with Ubiquiti Unify. We use it a lot because I like the platform a lot. I've been using installing it for over 10 years, 12 years, I guess. So the problem is, when we buy it from the official distributor, we get it around 3 to 5% cheaper than the price the distributors, sell it at in their online platforms. So there is no real market, because the distributor who controls the entire supply also sells it at a very low price directly online, because they just want to
Yeah.
get the volume. So they're killing the resale market. So you have 2 3 people that are posting it all online, and we just have to sell it more expensive. And of course it always sometimes gets into awkward conversations, where people are like, well, why are you charging me 20% more than what I see online for an access point? And we have to say, well, because we have after sales service. If it breaks today, tomorrow you already have a new one, while we deal with the returns and everything. But it just creates a situation where it's really difficult for, let's say, new people to get into the industry, who want to start doing this, who don't yet have like a years of projects done that gives you trust. So I would wish that brands that are here and distributed, that they respect certain margins, so that you have integrators that can actually resell your products. Because right now, what I've seen with most distributors, they just have another company that sells things at bottom price.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm wondering, when the products are a case of you. Let me say that again, because I was realizing that was absolute gibberish. In the cases when you are the importer, when you're bringing products in,
Mhm.
do you often have to have a minimum quantity that you bring in? And do you then sometimes sell them to other integrators as well, to kind of offset the fact that you do have a minimum order and it is so hard to get?
So we're trying to do this. It's another business we started, because in Indonesia you can't mix like reseller, dealer, and importer. So we have a separate company for that. And we're trying to do this mainly with cables right now for cords, with certain lighting products that we're importing in bigger quantities. And now the latest thing we started to import into Indonesia is called Dendo Systems. It's a company out of Melbourne. They do beautiful PoE motors. So again, we are trying to import directly from their factory, meaning we have to buy big quantities, 100, 200, 300 units. And we're actively trying to show this to other integrators. We already found some shading company who really like them. So yeah, it only works that way. So, but that's a new move for us. So before, everything was from the integrator dealer mindset: buy a little bit more, you have stock. And now we're trying to be like, okay, what are the things we would really love to have, and it doesn't exist here? And that's how we're starting with those few segments at the moment.
And I imagine that that actually is also incredibly difficult if integrators aren't talking to each other or don't have a way to have that conversation.
Exactly, yeah.
So you mentioned before the grey market, about that being obviously it's a known entity within Indonesia. How often are you actually coming across product from the grey market? Is it an everyday occurrence for you? Are you seeing it constantly, or is it just a few products that you kind of can identify? How big of a problem is it?
anything that's niche is gray imported. Anything that's coming out of China is gray imported. So it's massive. I had a friend of mine. He works in a pro audio industry. His name is Ian Johansson from Sontastic. So they do more like big venues, beach clubs. He told me how he was at a big audio convention in Surabaya, I think, or Jakarta. On the show floor, we had all these Chinese brands who basically said, "Hey, we sell you, we come, we install turnkey solution. Don't worry, everything is taken care of." While in the other room were all the big importers of the international brands sitting with a government person who goes through all the complex things they will have to do to comply. Whereas the reality was on the show floor, all these brands were just like, yeah, you don't worry, you just pay, we'll bring it in, we'll send somebody to install it, bypassing all of that. So it's a very strange situation where both is happening at the same time. The ones who are trying to do it proper, they are scrutinized because they're trying to do it proper, and then you have all the brands out of China who are just like container after container getting into the country gray.
So I guess from where, it's easy for me to sit back here in Australia and say, okay, so Indonesia's population of 270 million odd.
Mhm.
It's meant to be the fastest growing middle market in Southeast Asia. They're expecting 25% growth year on year. Is that being reflected on the ground? Are you seeing that in Bali? Can you sit there and say, yeah, there's growth, or are these just kind of academic numbers that we hear and think, okay, that's not being reflected in reality?
I think Bali is a bit of a special use case anyway, because it's a holiday island. There's massive growth here. I would say there's overdevelopment actually. There's too much growth that's not sustainable. But I'm always thrilled when I see a fully Indonesian run business doing great, doing awesome. So I'm always happy when I meet a new supplier like that does special soundproof sliding doors. Indonesian company, Indonesian owned. I love it, right? So there's definitely growth. Um, Most of our clients are foreigners like myself, so I don't have the insight of what's happening in the Indonesian middle market, but I do know when we do a few jobs in Jakarta, there's definitely a need for high end solutions.
Okay. And because the reason why I asked that is obviously, geographically speaking, Indonesia is very close to Australia, and
Hmm.
we have a fair trade agreement in place, and Australian suppliers, even though they're mainly distributors, but for the people that do manufacture a product here, they're always looking for other opportunities. So I'm wondering what the opportunity is, as far as you're concerned, for Australian suppliers to actually get into the Indonesian market. Obviously, that'll help you, but what's the opportunity for them to do that, and what the potential size of the market? How would they be benefited coming into Indonesia as well?
I mean, it's again, I'm not a market analyst, right? So I live in my little bubble, and we know what we do for our customers. Indonesians are very price sensitive, and of course, the Chinese manufacturer will always win on that. And it's culturally, it's not a culture where everything is thought of long term. So people always think about today, maybe tomorrow, the day after tomorrow is already a bit far. So the argument of, hey, I'm installing this and it will last you for 10 years is a difficult sell if it then costs twice as much. But I do see when there's a brand that's if it's a brand where they're able to create it, make it a little bit hip, make it interesting. I think that's why Jung is succeeding, because Jung has all the different colors. So it's very easy to post about it on social media. Same with Sonos. Sonos is quite successful in Indonesia, I think. Um, so I think the approach in the beginning has to be lifestyle, because that's what people are after in Indonesia. If they're Indonesian, it's all about lifestyle, reality. How does that reflect? So I do think there are good opportunities, but I think it has to start first with, okay, what can we place in this market that's like an easy sell. And then what else can we bring on the back end for, let's say, custom integrators? If it's just custom integrator things, I think it's very difficult.
Yeah, which obviously then makes life difficult for you as well if they see that small opportunity, or if it is a very integrator specific brand, they'll probably sit there and think, okay, it's a kind of a big hurdle to jump, which obviously then has the flow and effect for you guys on the actual tools on job sites. Does I mean, again, in Australia, origin and point of origin does carry weight, and I'm wondering if that's a similar mindset in Indonesia. So, if there's products and they're made in Germany, made or they're Swiss made, they're made in New Zealand, made in Australia, that carries weight, and there's other places that less so. Is there a similar mindset in Indonesia, and are there countries that if something was made in Australia, made in New Zealand, that would carry more weight there? Or is it really just we need product?
In Bali, for sure, I know this carries weight for sure. Again, because you're dealing with a lot of foreigners, so you can often see, this is from Australia, this is from there. So it definitely carries weight. Um, we also do that. We have an Italian brand called Equinex. They do like nice KNX switches and beautiful power plugs, and we sell it as this is made in Italy. Or Garvan Acoustic, also from Italy. It's Italian made. It's high quality. For the right customer, it definitely matters. Um, yeah, and I think that's why, like in my business nowadays, we don't really do much marketing. We just have our relationship with architects and interior designers, and they do all the marketing for us. And I think that's where, again, if brands are more involved in, let's say, Arch.id, that's a big Indonesian convention, to show to interior designers, to show to architects, hey, what's possible, how it will elevate their designs, elevate their homes, then it will automatically get pushed. And if the architect and interior designers are saying, hey, lighting control system, this is what will elevate your home, beautiful light switches, yeah, that's definitely carrying a lot of weight.
So architects are highly influential in the Indonesian market as well. So it'd be very similar to what we deal with here. Do you find that they know much about smart home at all, or is it something they actively avoid?
In my experience, they don't know much about it. That's why, yeah, they come to us, and we a lot of what we do is education, right? We educate what is actually possible, what is sensible, what is not sensible. um, Everybody, like the typical conversation I have with some architects, they think like, oh, it's a smart home, you do everything on the phone, you don't need light switches. And I was like, no, 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 like, you want to have you really want to have tactile feedback. That's part of the experience. You don't just want to be on the phone in the morning when you go make a coffee. So it takes education. And I think the big push here should be, especially against older Chinese solutions, is to really push hard on centralized systems, panelized systems, because they last longer. And in our experience, they're easier for the electricians to understand. They just know, okay, lamp has to go there, lamp has to go there. Versus when it's wireless solutions, you see crazy stuff. Like we've done a site inspection this week, a little bar where they called us in to ask if we can change out the lighting system, and we just quickly checked. They were using an LTEC wireless solution. They had all these indoor LED drivers just sitting on the floor in the bar below the sink and below an oven. Just, you know,
Okay.
it's okay, it works until it just doesn't. And I think it's so dangerous because all these brands said, oh, it's easy, right? It's wireless, you just connect it and then it works. And it leads to super dangerous situation. Like, we saw another we did another inspection. There was like a kind of bar, a restaurant, nightclub, and we asked, so where's all your drivers? And They pointed us to a black plastic bag underneath the bar. So inside, I opened the plastic bag, and this where all the electrical wires went into all these wireless LED drivers, and it's just like under the bar where they clean with water, and then and the bar is made out of stainless steel. I'm just like, guys, like this is so dangerous. And when they asked the installer, who was also a foreigner, by the way, when they installed the installer, his reply was like, "Oh, it doesn't get so wet down there." So
Okay. Okay. So
it's
what I'm hearing is that education, please. Education
education,
is missing.
education, and yeah, education from how to do it, but also education, the benefit that it gives you. Like in Bali, the classic I always find, you walk into these beautiful villas, and then you have like a wall of light switches, like by the entrance, and nobody knows how to, like what goes to where, and then there's maybe some ugly labels just plastered around it. It's very strange. It's so strange. Or like, I went to we looked at the Kempinski Hotel in Bali, which is a beautiful hotel, and we went into the presidential suite because the GM wanted to show us the setup, and they had a lighting control system there, and they had certain smart features, but again, there was not one integrator who looked at it holistically of this is one room where different technology should go together. So there was some kind of, I don't know what it was, probably a KNX keypad with 8 buttons, and they just put like a sticker on every button that it 1 to 8, even though in the middle they could have put like proper labels. And then next to it was an ugly Daikin aircon thermostat, and then there was a remote control for the motorized shades. So it was one company did the light, one company did this, one company did that. Nobody ever thought about it as a full experience, and that I see a lot here. So education, as you're saying, education for the installer, but also education for the end user. What should they expect? What should they demand?
So how many integrators would you say are in Bali? So specifically Bali, not necessarily all of Indonesia, because I'm thinking if there's an opportunity here for suppliers to do education, and then from the association side to do education, if there's enough of a base there of existing integrators, it makes a lot of sense to actually bring things over.
So in Bali, I would say maybe, like when we're talking integrated that do lighting and audio and networking and everything, maybe 3 or 4.
Okay. And then wider Indonesia?
Difficult to say. I haven't met many that do like everything. So maybe 10. So there aren't many. There are people calling themselves integrator, but what I see happening a lot, they are specialized in one thing and then they subcontract.
Okay.
So we had a situation in Jakarta where we had to fly in as a rescue mission kind of thing a few days before a grand opening of a new venue restaurant, and I met with the integrator and I'm asking, so okay, run me through everything. So let's start with the networking. Okay, runs me through the network. So now let's do the audio. Oh, we have to wait for the audio guy. It's like, what do you mean? Can't you just like run me through it? Oh, no, it's somebody else. Later I find out it's just somebody they hired as a freelancer. Then okay, now run me through the CCTV. Oh, it's somebody else. So there are people saying they're integrator, but they're just bringing people together, and that leads to all sorts of issues. Because again, you're missing the person who looks at a project holistically of what does it actually need, how does everything work together, and what should be the experience for the person using it.
Yeah, exactly right. And it almost sounds like they're, well, I mean, realistically, that relying on subcontractors too much always ends badly. And that's where problems start, because you're relying on someone to essentially represent your brand and your company in a way that you want. But if they're not told what that is, then they're not going to do it. And then that's going to blow back on you as the primary contractor.
For sure, and common sense doesn't really exist here that much. So you can't if you can't expect people to do things correctly if you don't tell them exactly step by step by step by step by step everything how you want it.
Yeah. Yeah. And if that original person deciding what those steps are don't know the steps, well, then it's kind of dead on arrival. It's not going to go beyond those initial planning stages, and it's just going to, as you said before, leave a bad taste in everyone's mouth, and they're not going to really engage with smart home technology moving forward.
Hmm.
So, if there is an Australian distributor or supplier who listens to this and sits there and think, okay, we've got our Australian presence, we've got a presence, say, in New Zealand, we might have one somewhere else, we want to go into Indonesia, realistically, what do they need to know?
Get ready for a lot of nonsensical rules in government. Get ready to bribe government officials. I mean, not bribe, but encourage government officials. Usually, you will need a local company. So you need to establish a local company. That usually means you're partnering with an Indonesian to create that company. Um, so it's a bit tricky. Ideally, you find a distributor that already exists, but there aren't that many distributors, and there aren't that many distributors that we can recommend. So it's tricky. It's very tricky, and that's why we end up with so many brands just dealing with dealers directly, and it's on the dealers' responsibility to import the things somehow.
But even that, I mean, that would be helpful today, but it still sounds like the biggest issue that you're facing is on the education front.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I say, that's why it's very rare to see brands doing official trainings here. The only one I can really think of right now is Ubiquity. BenQ is doing some trainings, but most of them they just are like moving boxes, you know. And then I think also what in my experience, most distributors here are not really helping their resellers. They're just like, oh, you already bought it. Like, I don't want to give you warranty. I don't want to give you service. So it's because everybody wants to works with very small margins because they want to keep the price low. So there's also no good relationship usually between distributor and reseller. So I think that mindset has to change. You know, that mindset has to change where there's less price dumping and more sustainable growth versus I'll just move boxes as quickly as possible. And I think it's all about that long term sustainability, and you need to start with a few people that align with your vision, and I think then it can work.
So in that case, it's very much about finding suppliers who are willing to make that initial investment, knowing that it will be a long-term play. They're not necessarily going to make all their money back instantly. It's there to help establish the market and their opportunity to own the market too, if they get in first and do it properly.
Yeah, and I think they have to be careful with who they work with as like resellers to kind of protect the products to not end up on online platforms with prices dumped, because it just it kills the market. Like we had to drop brands like Kef, for example, not because we didn't like the brand, but because the distributor sometimes sold things cheaper online than what they sold it to us. And I have stock of things I bought from them, and they price dump it online. So why should I work with them? So it's sad that it's like this. So I think any brand that comes into Indonesia, they should stay away from online platforms. You know, and make that very clear to all the reseller. These products are not meant to be sold online. They're meant to be sold by you to your customer, to your showrooms in person. But the e-commerce is really the killer of the whole industry.
I would say that's the case outside of Indonesia as well. That's the same in Australia, New
Oh
Zealand,
yeah.
everywhere. That if you are serious about the integration and the custom channel, don't sell your products online.
Hmm.
And I think that, yeah, should be pretty much the rule. And most, you know, most suppliers who are dedicated to the channel do avoid doing that. So they just need to expand that mindset to all markets. So I guess before we go, moving forward, let's say 5 years time, what's the Indonesian market going to look like?
I think there will be more and more choice, mainly from China, with brands. Um, I do hope that there's more Western brands that don't ignore the market here, so that they are more aggressive and showing their presence. Because yeah, Indonesia is growing. It's a young economy. There's many young people, much more than in the West. So, and people are hungry here. They're hungry to grow. They're hungry to show to other people that they've grown. So for me, that's a great opportunity for brands to be here, to sell status, to sell experiences, a lifestyle that just is new and exciting to people. So I really hope that's where we're going.
Awesome. And bring education with them.
Yes, I mean, it doesn't work without it. Yeah.
That was David Ledermann, the co-founder of SGS Design and Integration in Bali. A big thanks to David for making the time, especially given he was in the middle of moving while we recorded. There are two takeaways from this episode I'd like to share before we wrap. The first is that, for Indonesia, education is the chokehold. Not certification, not product access, not even the bureaucracy. It's education. For the installers and integrators trying to learn their craft, for the architects who don't know what a smart home actually is, and for the end users who walk into beautiful villas and find a wall of unlabelled light switches by the front door. David's been around long enough to know what good looks like, and the gap between that and what most of Indonesia is currently delivering is wide. It's wide enough to either kill the category or, for the right brand, to be the biggest opportunity in the region. Which leads to the second takeaway. There's a real opportunity in Indonesia for Australian suppliers, but it's not a box-shifting opportunity. The brands that will win are the ones willing to invest in education first, channel protection second, and the short-term revenue last. If you're happy selling online and undercutting your own dealers, don't bother. If you're committed to a long game with a local partner who understands the regulatory landscape, the upside is significant. Indonesia is young, growing fast, and largely ignored by Western brands. That gap is yours to take if you want it. A big thanks to this episode's sponsors, ADI Global, Sonance, distributed by Amber Technology, Colosseum, and Connected Magazine. Without them, this show doesn't get made. If this episode gave you something, share it with one person in the industry who needs to hear it. Thanks for listening to Master Integrator. I'm Paul Skelton. I'll see you next time.